And you can see, with authors that there's capacity for pastoral care. It's a very vulnerable thing to bring a book into the world, both the lonely process of writing it and then that very exposed experience of it going into the world is now unalterable, and you're subject to people's opinions on it. And I can sort of see, well, look, there's loads of room there to be personally involved with people as they go through that process, and that's not at all dissimilar from helping people deal with the troubles of jobs and marriages and family and finance and all those things that I was doing for years. So.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Andrew Roycroft is a freelance editor and writer. He has published poetry in a number of Irish and British literary journals. He's produced work for BBC Radio 4. He's contributed to Arts Council Northern Ireland projects, and he's written commissioned work for New Irish Arts. He's also a regular contributor to the Rabbit Room poetry community. His Substack is New Grub Street. In this episode, Andrew and I talk about calling, Substack, and Seamus Heaney. Andrew Roycroft, so happy to have you on the Habit Podcast. This is exciting.
Great to be with you again, Jonathan. Thanks so much for the invitation. Really appreciate it.
Last time you were here, we talked about your collection of 33 poems about the book of John. We'll get around to your upcoming project, 66, I hope. I guess it'll be twice as good as 33. That's the hope. But first, let's just start with your Substack project, New Grub Street. First, I had to look up what New Grub Street meant. So why don't you explain where that name comes from?
Yeah, so Grub Street was a street in London that was specifically associated with people who were eking out a living by writing initially. So Alexander Pope makes mention of it. And at first it was seen as there was a certain amount of prestige attached to there being this street of writers. But increasingly it became identified with kind of hack writing because you have to, writing because you've got to support yourself. And George Gissing, probably the most famous novelist that most people haven't heard of, has a book entitled New Grub Street, which is really about the kind of wrestle between creative endeavour, which prioritises aesthetics, writerly integrity, with the kind of push the work out, make the money, and live by it. So it seemed like a really good name for a space where I'm both writing out of my life, stuff that really matters to me, but also in a sense it marked the beginning of writing for a living, and acknowledging that there is a part of this where you're putting your work into the world both creatively and commercially. So that's how I landed there.
Yeah. So you are just in the last few years have I don't want to say you've undergone you don't have a new calling, but you do have new expressions of your calling. I'd love to hear you talk about that. Those changes that you've been a pastor for most of your adult life, and I think that's right. Most of your adult life, is that fair? Yeah.
Yeah.
And here lately, you're a freelance writer. I'd love to hear about that transition, what that has been like, and how you've sorted that, how you've begun to sort that out.
Yeah, it's great. I think, the terms you phrased then are exactly right, Jonathan. It feels like the same calling, but being expressed in a different way. Yeah, for 24 years I was involved in full-time local church Christian work, most of it in pastoral ministry and sort of reasonably small churches here in Ireland. A little bit of time in Peru, working with some churches there, but most of it spent here in Ireland. And I think always for me there was two expressions of my calling. There was the kind of public pastoral preaching and all the sort of ministry stuff that went along with that, and there was also this interest, compulsion, pursuit of writing and editing, and just being involved in the world of words. And I think words and writing have been important to me all my life, looking back now from childhood. And there's all sorts of things we could talk about in the background of that maybe fed that, but the two things sat parallel for a long time. There was always a certain measure, I think, of tension between them from the point of view that I don't think sort of local church ministry understands writing vocation all that terribly well. I was always careful that, what I was doing in my spare time didn't get in the way of what I should have been doing day by day. But increasingly, probably from about, 10 years ago, the idea of writing being, equally part of what I needed to do vocationally became stronger and stronger. And opportunities, opened up more and more. The more I kind of just gently pushed at that, the more things came my way that just seemed to work and seemed to open. And I suppose in those 10 years as well, I began to take more seriously the idea of developing craft and really acknowledging my weaknesses as a writer and trying to. But that did normally sit quite compatibly with pastoral work. It's a bit like, Marilyn Robinson's character, John Ames, who wrestles with the fact that he's written as much as Augustine, but it's all in his attic. So I was writing sermons every week and seeing that as a creative endeavour, and then the other. And then, just about a year and a half ago now, really became clear that pastoral ministry wasn't going to sustain itself for me. And there's a lot of different factors in behind that. But it came much more quickly and suddenly than expected or ever would have desired that it came to an end. And Carolyn, my wife, and I, had talked about when we knew things were going to finish, what's the next step? And I think both of us knew that the writing and editing now had to come into this space and be the main expression of that vocation. And so that's where we stepped into in November 2024. And it's been a bit of a white knuckle ride at times. It's been interesting, exciting, varied. But I think what you said about expression, a good friend of mine, and I'll not name her, but spoke to me quite early on when I left, and they said your work as a pastor hasn't ended, and now you're called to shepherd words and shepherd through words, and that just helped me so much to see the seamless nature of this. So
I've always seen myself as having a dual calling between, teaching on the one hand and writing on the other, and usually sort of I'd write for a while, then I teach for a while, and then I go back to writing for a while. And here in the last few years, I've figured out more ways to do both of those things. And I said I had a dual calling. I feel like my calling has something to do with just sort of helping to shepherd good work into the world, and whether I'm the one who produces that or whether I'm helping other people produce it, it's all the same calling. And so I can relate to what you're saying here about it being one calling with two different ways of fulfilling that calling.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, you can see crossover with editorial work even, so some of the work I do for a London Christian publisher is, sort of managing editor work with them. And you can see, with authors that there's capacity for pastoral care. It's a very vulnerable thing to bring a book into the world, both the lonely process of writing it and then that very exposed experience of it going into the world. It's now unalterable, and you're subject to people's opinions on it. And I can sort of see, well, look, there's loads of room there to be personally involved with people as they go through that process. And that's not at all dissimilar from helping people deal with the troubles of jobs and marriages and family and finance and all those things that I was doing for years. So I often say writing problems are rarely just writing problems. There's usually, there's sense of self, and they're just human problems that express themselves in writing. Yeah,
typically.
Absolutely.
I mean, sometimes it's just a comma, but it's not usually just
Absolutely.
I'm not suggesting that every misplaced comma is somehow deep seated, but a lot of the writer's block and other things are not. And as you said, this weird shift from being alone to being overexposed, which not everybody experiences. Not everybody gets overexposed, but for crying out loud, I mean, even the idea. As you've worked with writers, maybe you've had to deal with the fact that release day can be a very lonely day for a writer. When you think the world, you know better, but you think the world's going to pay attention on release day, and the world's got other things to pay attention to besides a book coming out.
Absolutely. There's a line in a Van Morrison song where he says, I bear my soul to the crowd. never know what the cost. Most stand and laughed out loud like nothing's been lost. And you sort of recognize that, this thing
Yeah.
of enormous weight to you or to someone else just doesn't register in other people's lives at all. So yeah, I
Yeah.
totally get that. And I think there's loads of room to help writers and encourage them. And I've enjoyed that not just sort of formally with the publisher, but informally, just I think as I've stepped into freelancing and people identify you now as being in the sort of written world,
Hmm.
find other folks are getting in touch and just wanting conversation or support, and that just feels very natural to me.
Hmm.
Jonathan, I'm a pastoral person by
Yeah.
nature,
Hmm.
and expressing it within a sort of creative environment is a blessing, and I'd love to see more and more of that naturally,
Yeah.
develop. So
Are these people who are they subscribe to your Substack, therefore they know? I mean, is that kind of how they're finding you? How would you say people know that you're in the, as you said, the written world now?
yeah, I think Substack was, you know, I looking back retrospectively, it's a good move when I stepped into freelancing because it put a billboard up really saying this is what I'm doing now, and
Yeah.
I'm crediting this as something I want to give myself to vocationally. So I think certainly it's placarded that, and I find conferences I'm going to, the degree of follow up and re-engagement after conferences now, with people I meet and get talking to, or if I'm leading a seminar or whatever, there's a greater readiness for people to make contact because I think they just perceive that this is what I'm doing, and
Yeah.
there may be balancing a main expression of the vocation in another direction. So I've really enjoyed that, and yeah, I don't think it's because they're looking at me and thinking I've got any writing advice at all, because I know they know I don't. But I think it's just somebody that they see as having taken this step, and that maybe meaning something in some way. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay. I'm about to change the subject to
sure.
something else that you have uh, long, long expertise in. I just recently finally started reading Seamus Heaney. Seamus He.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, we pronounce the last name Heaney, don't we?
Heaney, yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
it's a little it's not fair that the EA in the first name says A and the EA in the last name says E. But anyway, Seamus Heaney, and I've seen him here and there anthologized. I know people love Seamus Heaney, and I've
Mm.
loved everything I've ever read. But as I started reading through his collected works, I could not believe just how brilliant Seamus Heaney's poem poems are. So
Mhm.
I know you, as a fellow Northern Ireland, is it Northern Islander,
Yeah.
a
There's
Northern
there's about
Irish person.
there's about five ways to say that, and not one will do just grand, Jonathan. Yeah. So
I know you are way into Seamus Heaney. So, what is your answer to the question? What's so great about Seamus Heaney?
yeah, I think probably the first thing I would say is his humanity. I think
Yeah,
that's what lives and breathes in his work. So he's a poet of tremendous dexterity, insight. He's a man of, he was a man of great learning. He had a capacity to connect worlds, from sort of the Tolland man in Scandinavia to punishment beatings in Northern Ireland. He can make those kinds of what now seem obvious connections across history, genre, but at the heart of it all, I think, is his humanity, his depth and warmth, his engagement, his honest engagement with the world, not a commodified humanity, not a placarded humanitarianism, but a
yeah,
genuine human heart. And two things stand out for me in that. One was when I used to work in a bookshop in Belfast, and whenever Beowulf was the translation was released,
yeah,
we provided the books for the launch night in I think it was the Elmwood Hall in Belfast near Queen's University. And one of my most prized possessions is a signed copy of Beowulf First Edition. So if the
oh,
house ever goes on fire after I've got all humans and pets out, that's the next thing I go back in for. But
yeah,
I went to the launch, sat in the second row, so I was so close to where he was standing. Here's this guy who's taken an old English poem and has translated it into what's viewed as one of those credible modern interpretations of it.
yeah,
And it felt like a neighbour had walked up to the back fence in the yard and had spent just 40 minutes or so talking to you about it, helping you understand it, drawing you into
Yeah.
his world, and then wishing you good night and sending you home again. And at the time, I suppose all the pretensions of youth, I'd gone thinking, I'm in the presence of a great poet. I came out believing I'd been in the presence of a great human being. And to me, those are, possibly not always joined up together.
As
Just
a Milton scholar, I know what you mean about those not necessarily poets being connected.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas Heaney, there's just a great humanity. And the second thing, in my pastoral work, about 10 years ago, I had a long run of visits with people who were in a hospice. So with just a number of church members were entering the final stages of their life, were in the hospice. And one of the days I went in to visit one of the people, they said to me, Andrew, before we talk, could you go out to the courtyard? I want you to see something that I know you'll love. So that all the rooms in her part of the hospice opened out into this beautiful courtyard. And outside is a circular bench with a sculpture of a woman who looks quite tired. And she's draped a blanket over the circular bench. And she's just sitting, taking a quiet moment. And the whole way around the circle on the bench is a line that Seamus Heaney was commissioned and provided for free for the hospice. I'll not tell you what the line is, A, because I can't remember from memory, and B, it's worth looking up. But what struck me was, here's this guy, who can write at this level that academics will be pondering his work for years, and yet patients in a hospice can be ministered to through his lines. Can I tell you one other story that illustrates that, Jonathan, at the
Please,
risk of
yeah.
boring for Ireland? We were at the Seamus Heaney home place in Balachi in the summer, which is it's a brilliant sort of living museum to his work. And that's his hometown. And the person at the counter, we were talking just about Heaney's humanity, her and I, and she said, "Oh, there's a teacher who's from the village here, and she was driving home from work one night and was listening to Seamus Heaney on the audio. Got home, and he was at a white tie event on the television with the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh, all finery. I think it was Dublin Castle. And the next night she drove into Balachi, and he was sitting on the wall outside the chip shop talking to one of the locals. And he never lost that. His brother said he never left Balachi. And I think that's part of what makes all those poems right, because they're coming from a great soul. I don't know whether that makes sense or not, but that's
Yeah.
a very long answer to a very short question, John.
I love that idea that he was so erudite and well read, and yet, that's not poetry doesn't come from reordering the ideas that you've gotten out of books. I mean, I guess there is a kind of poetry that does that, but that idea that you suggested, that he took all that and said that, in essence, this is life too. The reading is life, and the sitting outside the wall, on the wall outside the chip shop, is life, and it all belongs together.
It does, and there's an element of that in his poetry. I mean, the poem Casualty, which records the death of Louis McNeill during the Troubles. There's this lovely part of that poem where he talks about wanting to talk to Louis McNeill in the bar, in the pub, and occasionally Louis would turn the talk to poetry, and then Heaney says, politic, shy of condescension, I would turn the talk to fishing. So there's just something there. And I mean, where he's from, I was in that area just yesterday in Balachi, outside the Seamus Heaney home place. And, it's not the most romantic location in the world, and yet he never lost the sense that was the heart of where he drew meaning and inspiration from as well. So,
yeah. Well, maybe his best known poem, at least over here, is the one where he's watching his, I guess it's called Digging, where he's watching his father dig, and then of course in the last stanza he says, it starts with him holding his pen like a squat like a gun, snug as a gun.
Yeah.
And then watching his father, and then that, I love at the end where he says, okay, now I'm not going to get it right, but basically, the pen is his spade and he's going to dig with it.
Yeah.
And because you read that poem, you think he's going to. I never suspected he was going to somehow talk down about his father, who was a potato digger.
Mm-hmm.
I never suspected that, but I thought he was going to somehow do some sort of self-flagellation of, I come from a hardworking people and yet I'm just a poet. I thought you think it's going to be something like that. And he says, no, this is my call. This is what I do. And what my father does is important with that shovel, and what I do with this pen is important. I'm gonna dig too, and that poem means a lot to me as a writer, especially. I spent much of my life thinking, because I'm a sensitive literary type, somehow I'm not measuring up to to the men in my family who, work on cars and do things like that. And that poem means a lot to me. So, no, this is work too.
It's beautiful. And I think the fact that it appears as the first poem in his first formal collection, and it gives a manifesto for his writing life, but also I think anybody who's from a background which has not been, as my own is, which has not been literary but manual and physical, it dignifies and blesses really the work of writing as true labor. Yeah.
It dignifies both kind of labor, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And he never seems to have lost sight of that. There's he has a beautiful poem called Carrying On, written to his brother Hugh. And it's among the most devastatingly beautiful poems you could read. It begins with his brother, playing with a brush that was used to whitewash the pig pen, and marching round with it. But the end, he talks about his brother Hugh, who's carried on the farm all those years and has to steady himself in the byre when he's taken an epileptic fit, and regains himself and goes on. And there's an esteem and a love for Hugh that is just so deep and rich, and no sense of patronisation, no sense I'm the big name, Hugh stayed at home. But Hugh outlived him, but he eulogizes him so beautifully and so tenderly. And I think that's the other thing, for a writer writing in the 1960s and 70s from Ireland, to write so tenderly and to keep that tenderness through the toughest parts of our history here in the North.
Yeah.
And to insist on that. He and Michael Longley both, who's the first anniversary, whose death is tomorrow, the 22nd of January, they both had this tender lyricism in the middle of really a brutal part of Irish history. So, yeah. It's hard to get me to shut up about Seamus Heaney. I'm aware of that, John. So please just tell me to zip it as soon as you need me to.
Well, let's talk a little more broadly. Before we started recording, you got on the subject of the bardic tradition in Ireland and what the bards meant. That I think you said, now I can't remember who you're quoting, but Brazil got football and Ireland got poets.
Yeah, absolutely.
And tell me about you were opining that maybe that bardic tradition has something to do with why Irish writers are still just so good.
Yeah, I think there's definitely something about Ireland. I mean, there's something about Irish speech.
Yeah.
Even I think of my grandparents' speech, the things that they would have said that were quite poetic, but it's just everyday patter, everyday speech. So I think there is something woven into us, that we've got this sort of, people talk about the gift of the gab, but that always sounds like sales pitch. It's not that. It's just a facility with words in our culture. That's maybe ebbing a bit now. I don't know. But certainly I think words have been long privileged in our culture. I mean, it's interesting. You go to Dublin and you look at the Book of Kells, these very formal manuscripts, as you know, Jonathan, and yet you've got Irish monks who can't help but write a poem about their cat, or write a poem about a blackbird. It's just it's why doodle when you can write a poem,
Right.
There is a dignity afforded to it. I mean, I was reading recently R.F. Foster's History of Ireland, and he talks about, in the 16th century, prior to plantation really taking on from the English, the role of the bard within Irish society was not like a court jester or like a minstrel or a troubadour.
Mm.
This person carried really significant political weight and nous, and
Hmm.
so words seem to really have been at the heart of how the Irish understand themselves, express themselves as well, and even in my upbringing, whenever the troubles were raging, words were always weighted in some way.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's interesting. The poet John Hewitt wrote a poem in the middle of the troubles called "Neither Elegy Nor Manifesto," and the poem is really about how he picks his way through the rubble of language as much as he
Mm.
does through the rubble of bombings.
Yeah.
And it's clear his full flex as an Ulster writer, as an Irish writer, is at work, and he's recognizing just how crucial words are. The poem begins, "Bear in mind these dead. I will not say remember," because remember's got all this. So there's
Mm.
this kind of, I don't know. It's almost like an assumed weight to words, and I mean, you take even in the grassroots, one of John Hewitt, the poet John Hewitt's discoveries and things that he championed were the weaver poets, these ordinary weaving people who were just writing poetry. And I would have seen it even in pastoral work. I remember visiting an elderly couple, and the wife and the family brought out this book and said, I've just written poems all my life.
Hmm.
As you do. And it's this massive book. Now,
Wow.
okay, there might have been an equal share of doggerel alongside profundity, but
Sure.
there's an instinct or a mechanism that I think is just part of who we are. And you can tell by how long my answers are that we just
Yeah.
love
Right.
talking as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You've got the gift of the gab too. Yeah. That language of bear in mind, I will not say remember.
Mhm.
Um, to remember is to put back together, to put them to the opposite of dismembering. But
Mhm.
I guess sometimes you can't
Yeah,
remember. You can
absolutely.
only bear. You can only carry.
Yeah, it's amazing.
That is so wow.
And also discharging the political connotations of, um, remembrance would be a way of looking back on war dead.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And so even sort of, what's the word, kind of diffusing that idea and saying, no, just bear them in
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. So yeah, that just seems to be part of who we are. As I say, my grandparents, I've kind of bagged some of the things they used to say, and it's just this colourful language. I imagine you're probably the same in the American South, but
Yeah,
if
sure.
if if there's a straight way of saying it, you didn't say it straight. You
Yeah.
you said it slant. It's just the way it
Yeah.
was. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Niall Williams, talks about the phrases that they could be very local too.
Mhm.
The grandmother from County Cork or wherever it was, had a whole different set of interesting phrases from the people in the next county over.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, okay. As I said last time you were on the Habit podcast, we were talking about your collection 33.
Mm.
Tell me about 66. How's that coming along?
Yeah, it's coming along not too bad. I'm on a little bit of a deadline on it, which is good. It's good
Yeah.
that that's there. But yeah, I'm really enjoying the project. 33 consists of 33 poems of 33 words each in the life of Christ from John's Gospel. And I've thought for a long time about I would love to write a poem on every book of the Bible.
Hmm.
And I've been trying for a long time to figure out how I would do that. So I decided I would write 66 poems, and I'd make them now 33 lines each. And I suppose keeping the 33 in place is almost that everything I write about every biblical book is to a factor of Christ,
Hmm.
that it's divided across his life, whatever's
Yeah.
happening in there.
Yeah.
So I've been working on this. It's demanded, some of the same disciplines as preaching did, of reading behind the book and looking for context, and
Hmm.
but also different from preaching, just allowing the book to breathe, not needing to find a series of conclusions for each book that I'm
Hmm.
working on, but allowing its questions to remain unanswered if they're unanswered in the book. And also recognizing that I'm really only going to be able to take maybe one key theme out of larger
Hmm.
books.
Yeah.
And sometimes the smaller books then allow the themes to kind of live and breathe for themselves. So
Hmm.
Yeah, it's been a good experience so far. I've got lots of skeletons, and then I've got a few that are finished and that I feel, well, actually, yeah, that's there. And I found it a very emotional experience from the point of view of I was sharing at a thing I was asked to speak at on Monday. One of the poems in particular that I wrote in the Book of Lamentations. And I'm not a very emotional person, on the surface. But
Yeah.
when I finished writing it, I just sat and wept at the desk. And I thought, I preached the whole Book of Lamentations and that never happened.
Huh.
But there's something about allowing Jeremiah to open his heart and to try to reflect that heart pastorally towards the reader. So, yeah, the likes of that poem's finished and others are finished off. The idea of the book will be there'll be an introduction to the book, very short, each book of the Bible, 33-line poem, a lino cut by Ned Bustard, and then some liturgical material that can be prayed through. Ideas, individuals can use it to familiarize themselves or reflect on the book, but also maybe in church environments. If a church is maybe studying through Lamentations, they
Yeah.
can maybe use the poem as a way in or a way through or a way after, so.
The liturgical material is that one set of liturgical material for each book of the Bible?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
just be a little snap, of
Hmm.
maybe a snatch of prayer or whatever it is, just to try and help the reader to draw both the passage of scripture, the poem, and the art, all of that into prayer. So,
Hmm.
yeah, I'm enjoying the process. I am finding it demanding, which I think is good. I'm trying to not write descriptively, this book is all about, but sort
Hmm.
of getting the heart, so the poem on Lamentations, I took the image of retrieval after a bomb, where you go into the rubble field or the debris field and everything's sorted into boxes until
Hmm.
it can be dealt with.
Hmm.
And that's how I've written in the Lamentations poem, because
Hmm.
obviously Lamentations is an acrostic, so I'm thinking about the structure of the book. Each of the chapters are acrostic, apart from the last chapter that's not, that in the Hebrew, that then unleashes the stuff. So it's just trying to really be true to the grain of the books, but also get to my heart and the heart of the reader too. So,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
All right. Now, uh, next to last topic.
Mm.
You went to Florida last week.
Yeah.
I like the image of Andrew Roycroft in Florida. I like to picture you visiting the alligator farm and maybe putting on some Mickey Mouse ears. Anything interesting happened in Florida while you were there?
Yeah, I got to go down to Winter Park, which was nice. And yeah, I got to go to Writer's Block bookstore, which felt very appropriate.
Yeah.
So that was lovely. Yeah, just seeing
Yeah.
that part of the world, and
Nothing too swampy though.
nothing swampy. There was really no swamp involved at all, which is mildly disappointing.
It seemed like a waste of an opportunity.
And no barks of any bog oils or anything
Yeah,
at all.
that's too bad. All
But
right.
yeah, Winter Park was worth going. And I discovered, I didn't know this before, that Billy Collins had lived and taught there for a few years. So
I didn't know that. In Winter
that was a
Park?
nice, in Winter Park, yeah. So it was a
Okay.
nice wee connection. Picked up a nice book of Marie Howe's book, or poetry, which I've had no
Okay.
engagement with, which was great. So, yeah,
Okay. Well, all
yeah.
right. Well, my traditional last question, as you probably know, is who are the writers that make you want to write?
Yeah, so I think this changes almost every year. I tend to hyperfixate on an author for a while
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
just do a deep dive. So last year for me, it was Victor Hugo,
Hmm.
and I had never read Les Miserables, never read it. And I'd actually managed to stay free of all movie adaptations and musicals. So I don't know
Hmm.
how I managed that, but I was maybe vaccinated in my infancy or something. But I love Hugo. Christina Donaher has done a great translation of Les Miserables in the latest Penguin Classics. And again, I think it goes back to that humanity.
Yeah.
Hugo's desire to meet the underdog in a way that maybe matches up to the Gospel of Luke, one of my favorite Bible books. This humanization of people who in his age were dehumanized.
Hmm.
His eye to detail for local things. So he explains the sewer system of Paris over about
Okay.
35 pages, but it's important, and it's important So this deep rootedness in the city of Paris, and I know with Notre Dame, then he has even more engagement with architecture, and so I love Hugo, and his creation of Monseigneur Bienvenu. To me, he has managed as a person who doesn't hold to traditional Christian faith. He has managed to construct a saint who's believable and tangible and earthy. So Victor Hugo will be one of them. Am I allowed more than one, Jonathan?
Yeah, you are allowed more than one. Yeah.
Yeah, I think over the last sort of 15 months or so, Mary Oliver's poetry has become more important to me as well. I think that's just very personal, and she makes me want to. She's got a lucidity. There's a fearlessness, so she's not interested in impressing me as a writer. Her poems are like clear water. I can see the bottom, and I think that makes me want to write in that way. And I think her writing's very ministerial too. I had an incredible experience, when I was just contemplating coming out of pastoral work, and it was painful, it was traumatic, all that kind of stuff. And I went to a local bookstore. I had read very little of Mary Oliver, and I took down her selected poems and read the poem "The Journey." And it was just literally like, I opened the book, and that was the poem that was there.
That was it, yeah.
And I thought, I want to be able to write like that. She writes like a pastor, but not in any patronizing way. So, needless to say, I bought the book that day as well. So Mary Oliver and Victor Hugo would be big ones for me at the minute.
Yeah, great. Well, Andrew Roycroft, thank you. This has been so fun. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, lovely to talk to you again, John. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. You can support their work, including this podcast, by becoming a member. Visit rabbitroom.com/membership. Special thanks as well to Taylor Leonard for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorleonard.com. The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.